A backyard in the American suburbs looks almost the same everywhere you go. A trellis with something climbing it, a border of flowering shrubs running along the fence line, bees moving from bloom to bloom in the kind of unhurried pattern that makes an afternoon feel safe, a kid's bicycle leaning against a hedge that nobody has ever thought twice about. Somebody planted every one of these things on purpose. Somebody chose the color at the nursery, dug the hole, watered it through its first summer, and felt good about the choice. None of it grew here by accident, and that is exactly the problem. Nothing in this picture asks to be feared. The hedge does not look dangerous. The border flowers do not look dangerous. That calm, ordinary appearance is doing more work than most people realize. Every plant we are about to count down was picked out and paid for, planted with care, and is, in one documented and medically verifiable way or another, capable of killing the person tending it. Today we are counting down 11 popular American garden plants that carry a real documented mechanism for killing a human being, ranked from the least severe entry point to the one whose presence in American yards is the strangest of all. This is not a list of wilderness hazards you might stumble across on a hike or a swamp trail. Every plant here was chosen, bought, and installed on purpose. That is the thread running through the whole hour. The danger in an American backyard usually was not an accident of nature. It was a decision, made in a garden center, one flat of seedlings at a time. If you are the kind of person who reads plant tags before you buy, or who has ever second-guessed something already growing along your own fence, stick around, because by the end of this you may be walking your own yard with new eyes. Tell us in the comments which one of these 11 you already have growing at home, because based on how common several of these plants are, more of you have one than you think. Let's get into the list. Number 11 is Lily of the Valley, the small white bell-shaped flower sold every spring as a symbol of romance, renewal, and, in France, friendship itself, going back to a tradition credited to King Charles IX in the 1560s. Its charm is part of the danger. Lily of the Valley contains close to 40 separate cardiac glycosides, the most significant being convolatoxin, a compound with a lethal dose in laboratory studies of just 0.08 of a milligram per kilogram of body weight, interfering directly with the sodium and potassium pump inside heart muscle cells. Case literature published in the journal Circulation documents human poisonings from this plant, producing bradycardia, elevated blood pressure, and cardiac arrhythmias, including incidents where the toxin was ingested, not from the plant itself, but from the water left standing in a vase of cut stems. Other documented cases involve people mistaking its young leaves for wild garlic while foraging. Because Lily of the Valley is marketed as a wedding flower and a springtime tradition, its reputation is entirely wholesome, and that reputation is precisely why so few people realize the plant's toxin does not stay contained to the flower. It grows quietly in shaded beds under trees, spreading along the ground into dense green carpets that most homeowners never think to fence off from a curious toddler or a dog. It has been sitting quietly in the vase water the whole time. Number 10 is larkspur, sold under the botanical name delphinium and beloved for the tall blue and purple spikes it adds to cottage-style borders, a relative, as it happens, of a far more dangerous flower still to come on this list. Larkspur contains deterpenoid alkaloids that act as neuromuscular paralytics, blocking the signal between nerve and muscle in a manner researchers compare to curare, the same class of toxin responsible for an estimated $234 million in cattle losses across the western United States every year, according to agricultural research spanning more than a century. Human poisoning is rare, but it is documented. A clinical case published in the journal Clinical Toxicology describes a teenager who developed ventricular tachycardia and convulsions after ingesting the plant's root. The overwhelming majority of the warnings written about larkspur are aimed at ranchers protecting grazing cattle, out on open range hundreds of miles from the nearest subdivision. Almost none of them are aimed at the gardener standing in a suburban plant nursery, choosing a flat of it purely for the color of the flower spike, and never once reading past the plant tag's care instructions. Number 9 is autumn crocus, a bulb planted for its unusual habit of flowering with no leaves at all in the fall, which is exactly why it is sometimes sold under the nickname Naked Lady. The leaves do not appear until spring, and when they do, they closely resemble wild garlic. Autumn crocus contains colchicine, a compound that halts cell division throughout the body, working first on the fastest-growing tissues in the gut and bone marrow, and later on the heart and kidneys, as the poisoning progresses over several days. Between the years 2020 and 2022, French poison control centers logged 28 cases of people confusing autumn crocus with wild garlic while foraging for pesto or salad greens, 2 of which ended in death. Reviewing the wider case literature, researchers have reported mortality rates as high as 35% among people who accidentally ingest the plant, with fatal cases showing a pattern of vomiting within hours, followed by a deceptive lull, followed by multi-organ failure days later. The reason it goes unnoticed is almost architectural. The blooming crocus and the dangerous leaf never appear on the same visible plant at the same time. So, a gardener can admire the flower in October with no visual link at all to the danger waiting quietly in the ground the following spring, when an entirely different part of the same bulb will have pushed up leaves that look, to an untrained eye, exactly like something worth putting in a pan. Number 8 is foxglove, the tall, spire-flowered plant grown across American and British gardens for what horticulturists simply call vertical interest. Foxglove produces more than 100 distinct cardiac glycosides, chiefly digitoxin and guaitoxin, which force the heart to contract with dangerous power by disabling the pump that regulates its sodium and potassium balance, the very same family of chemical later refined into the heart medication digoxin. A published outbreak case series documents 9 people poisoned after brewing what they believed was comfrey tea from garden leaves that were, in fact, young foxglove, with several developing dangerous heart rhythms requiring temporary cardiac pacing. One forensic review of a related case is literally titled, in reference to the painter who cut off part of his own ear it could have happened to Van Gogh, and documented poisoning can even produce a distinctive symptom of seeing yellow or green halos around lights. Before it flowers, foxglove's leaves are functionally identical to several edible garden herbs, which means the plant's most dangerous phase is also its most disguised one, arriving months before the tall purple bells that would otherwise give it away. It has been mistaken for dinner before, and given how often it is planted beside kitchen herb beds for its height and its hardiness, it will be again. Number 7 is azalea, alongside its close relative, rhododendron, 2 of the most heavily planted flowering shrubs in American residential landscaping, together representing well over 1,000 cultivated varieties. Both contain gray anotoxin, a compound that locks sodium channels in an open position and overstimulates the vagus nerve, producing dangerously low blood pressure and a heart rate slow enough to cause fainting. A documented case involved a 5-year-old girl who sucked on 3 azalea flowers after mistaking them for honeysuckle. Honey made from the nectar of these plants, known worldwide as mad honey, has been linked to cases of complete heart block and cardiac arrest in adults who ate only a few spoonfuls. The danger here got folded into ancient history, into stories of Roman soldiers poisoned by honey made from these very flowers more than 2,000 years ago, and somewhere in that long translation from battlefield legend to garden center bestseller, the modern risk got left behind entirely. These shrubs line entryways and foundation beds in nearly every American suburb built in the last 70 years, chosen precisely because deer tend to leave them alone, which is itself a quiet clue about what the plant is actually capable of. Number 7 is the ambush hiding in the hedge. Number 6 is Pacific yew, an evergreen conifer sold at ordinary nurseries as a low-maintenance hedge and foundation plant. Nearly every part of yew, aside from the fleshy red aril surrounding the seed, contains taxine alkaloids that block sodium and calcium channels in heart muscle, with a lethal dose in humans estimated at roughly 0.6 to 1 3/10 gram of leaf per kilogram of body weight. A documented fatal case involved a large ingestion of Pacific yew needles that produced rapid cardiac decompensation and killed the patient in roughly 1 hour, despite defibrillation, epinephrine, and amiodarone. Unlike most entries on this list, yew poisoning has no reliable antidote and consistently resists standard emergency treatment. It sits in the landscaping aisle labeled simply as an evergreen shrub, and most people assume that label means safe by default, since nothing about a dense green hedge suggests a plant capable of stopping a heart faster than almost anything else grown in an American yard. Everyone trims it into a fence twice a year, tossing the clippings into a yard waste bin without a second thought. Almost no one ever reads what is actually inside them. We are halfway through the list, and the pattern so far should already be clear. None of these plants snuck into an American backyard on their own. Every single one was chosen, purchased, and planted deliberately, which means the danger in a garden usually was not an accident of nature at all. It was a decision made at a nursery checkout, sealed with a debit card and a receipt. If you have made it this far, go ahead and subscribe, because we cover the plants hiding in plain sight across every region of this country, one backyard at a time. The rest of this list only gets harder to believe, because the next several entries include the kind of documented human deaths that most gardeners assume only happen in old stories, not in their own zip code. Number 5 is Angel's Trumpet, along with its close relative Jimson weed, both sold openly as fragrant, trumpet-flowered ornamentals with no federal restriction on their sale anywhere in the country. Both plants are loaded with anticholinergic tropane alkaloids, chiefly atropine and scopolamine, which block the nervous system's ability to regulate heart rate, body temperature, and basic organ function, producing dilated pupils, dry skin, and vivid hallucinations before the more dangerous effects set in. Public health reporting has documented poisonings tied to this plant across multiple states, including Connecticut, Illinois, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, and Texas, with 2 teenage deaths recorded in Texas during the same summer. In Florida alone, 112 teenagers were hospitalized in a single year after ingesting the plant, according to university research tracking its spread, sometimes nicknamed the poor man's peyote by teenagers who found it legal, free, and growing in a neighbor's yard. The city of Maitland, Florida eventually banned residents from planting it at all, becoming one of the first towns in the country to do so, though the plant continues to grow wild nationwide, well beyond that single city's limits. It remains legal almost everywhere else, sold at garden centers for its fragrance and its enormous, trumpet-shaped blooms that can stretch the length of a forearm. Somewhere tonight, someone is steeping its flowers into tea, certain that a plant this beautiful, this fragrant, and this easy to buy could not possibly be this dangerous. Number 4 is rosary pea, a climbing vine grown specifically for its seeds, glossy red beads capped with a single black spot, prized worldwide for jewelry and craft work, under names like jaquirity bean and crab's eye. Those seeds contain aberan, a toxin that shuts down protein synthesis inside human cells at a molecular level comparable to ricin, with an estimated lethal human dose measured in a fraction of a microgram per kilogram of body weight. Case reports describe deaths among jewelry makers who pricked a finger while stringing the beads, and separate toxicology literature documents a 20-year-old man who died just under 5 days after swallowing roughly 1,000 crushed seeds he had purchased online. The plant is not hiding at all. It is being sold, drilled, and strung onto necklaces specifically because of how attractive the seed looks, now naturalized and spreading through Florida and much of the southern United States as a fast-growing ornamental vine along fences and trellises. Most poisonings involve children who find a broken piece of jewelry or a loose seed on the ground and, out of simple curiosity, put it in their mouth. Number 4 is the deadliest bead in the craft box. Number 3 is oleander, one of the most common ornamental shrubs across the warm climate regions of the American South and Southwest. Frequently used to fill highway medians and property lines because it tolerates drought, poor soil, and neglect so well. Oleander contains more than 30 distinct cardiac glycosides packed into every part of the plant, from root to flower. In April of 2016, an 18-year-old draft horse and a dog in California were deliberately poisoned with bait containing oleander, placed along a fence line and in a horse pasture. Both animals died, and the case was documented in the California Food Animal Health and Food Safety Bulletin. A separate study out of UC Davis reviewed 130 horses referred to the university's veterinary medical teaching hospital for suspected oleander exposure and found 30 confirmed cases, half of which were fatal. In humans, a review of the global case literature on oleander poisoning describes outcomes ranging from mild gastrointestinal symptoms to sudden cardiac death, with treatment often complicated by limited access to the specific antibody-based antidote used in severe cases. Because oleander is everywhere, planted along roads, parking lots, and property lines by the thousands across entire states. Its sheer familiarity has done more to erase the danger than any camouflage could ever manage. Its leathery, dark green leaves and clusters of pink or white flowers are so common along commutes and school pickup lines that most drivers have stopped seeing it at all. It has been lining the highway median the whole time. Number 2 is water hemlock, a wild-growing member of the carrot family that shows up uninvited at the edge of a vegetable bed and, more often than not, gets left standing there on purpose. Its clusters of small white flowers and feathery, almost parsley-like leaves look close enough to wild parsley or another harmless umbellifer that home gardeners routinely mistake it for something worth keeping between the tomatoes and the herb rows. The United States Department of Agriculture describes it plainly as the most violently toxic plant that grows in North America, and it has been linked to more than 60 deaths in the United States since 1979. According to data compiled by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, its toxin, toxin, is concentrated most heavily in the plant's tuberous roots and acts fast, triggering seizures within roughly 15 minutes of ingestion, followed by a fatal disruption of heart rhythm. There is no antidote. Unlike almost everything else on this list, water hemlock was rarely bought and planted on purpose. It was simply never pulled, tolerated season after season by a gardener who assumed that anything growing this close to the vegetables must belong there. Number 2 is proof that choosing not to remove a plant is still, in its own quiet way, a choice. Number 1 is poison hemlock, and this is the entry that completes everything the rest of this list has been building toward. Poison hemlock was not a stowaway. Historical agricultural records show it was deliberately brought to the United States from Europe in the 1800s as an ornamental garden plant, chosen specifically for its delicate white flower clusters and fern-like, almost lacy foliage. It has since spread into every state in the country except Hawaii, according to Extension Service records, growing along fences, ditches, and stream banks from coast to coast, often mistaken for wild carrot or Queen Anne's lace, distinguished mainly by the purple blotching along its otherwise smooth, hollow stem. The plant contains conaine, an alkaloid concentrated most heavily in its seeds and mature growth, which shuts down the nervous system's control of the muscles used for breathing, leading first to trembling and a weakening pulse, and finally to death by respiratory paralysis. This is, briefly, the same mechanism of death recorded in ancient accounts of the philosopher Socrates, executed by hemlock poisoning more than 2,000 years ago, though that history is only a footnote here, not the point. The point is what forensic toxicology has confirmed far more recently. A post-mortem case from California in 2004 and another from Pennsylvania in 2019 both confirmed conaine in the blood of the deceased, proof that a plant Americans once chose to plant in their own gardens is still, in the current century, taking lives without asking permission. It grows tall now, sometimes past 8 feet, with hollow stems and clusters of small white flowers that look, at a passing glance, almost identical to the wildflowers lining half the country's back roads and drainage ditches. It was invited in on purpose over 200 years ago, and unlike everything else on this list, it no longer needs anyone's permission to keep spreading. It never once left. Walk back through that suburban yard from the beginning of this list, the trellis, the flowering border, the bicycle leaning against the hedge, the bees drifting between blooms and the unhurried pattern that made the whole scene feel safe. Nothing about that description was false. Gardens really are calm, and they really are beautiful, and none of that changes because 11 of the plants that might be growing in one also happen to carry a documented, verifiable way of ending a human life. The point of this list was never to make you afraid of your own backyard. It was to make you look at it the way you would look at anything you actually understand, with respect for what it can do and genuine curiosity about what it actually is. Most people who grow every plant on this list will never have a single problem, because gardening is, in the end, mostly about attention, and attention is the one thing this list has been asking of you the entire time. The next time you walk past a border of oleander, or notice a spike of foxglove leaning into the afternoon light, or catch the shape of a hollow, purple-blotched stem near the back fence, you will know something true about it that most people standing beside you do not. That is not a reason to tear the garden out. It is a reason to finally learn its name, and to keep tending the rest of it a little more carefully than you did yesterday.